Good morning and welcome to the Derby Property Summit for 2022, welcoming those in the quad this morning and those also watching us online on YouTube, either live or later in the day or the year. My name is John Forking, I'm Managing Director of Marketing Derby, and the great post-war management thinker Peter Drucker, he had a gift, in my view, for capturing complicated concepts. And one of these was his description of company purpose. And he used to say, the purpose of all organisations is to create a customer. And I've kind of perverted that slightly and into cities. And to me, the purpose of a city is to create a customer. And in one respect, that's some of the stuff we're going to be looking at over the next couple of hours. But it does beg the question, what does our customer want? And Marketing Derby carried out a survey of 500 people in the hinterland, qualitative and quantitative. And we asked them what would attract them back to Derby post-COVID. And these are the top 5 things that they said. Number 1 and 2, very similar, more things to do. I think might be the best thing of describing that, culture and leisure. More independent, quirky experiences, retail and the like. More green spaces, safer and attractive came out as number 4. And cheaper parking came out as number 5. And this is the voice of our customer. They're giving us a message here, very loud and very clear. And the thing is, the most important thing for me is they actually cared about the city centre. They did want to come back into the city centre, but they were pretty ruthless in terms of what they need to see in order to have it happen. A few weeks ago, I was in another place in Minneapolis in the United States. And it's an interesting city in that on the left there, my left, your right, you can see the gleaming skyscrapers, a typical American downtown. But then look at the photograph next to it, which I took at the same time as that one, just looking in the other direction. There's no people. There's no people on the streets. You go from gleaming skyscrapers to almost a soulless anti-city, very sterilized. No animation, and quite an interesting different model of how a city can be if you don't curate and take care of it. A couple of other photographs from my recent travels. London last week, you can see there tables and chairs out on the street. I keep looking at streets like this and thinking Friargate. In the middle, Salt Lake City, some amazing public realm, really top quality, attracting people into the downtown area. And then the last one is a European city called Mechelen, which is halfway between Brussels and Antwerp. And again, who have opened lots of the rivers that run underneath the city. Now, for me, what these 3 places show, it's a different approach. It's allowing a bit of edginess. It's bringing forward the green and the blue. But most important, it's cities curated for people. And again, this is one of the messages we're trying to get across today. And it's not just cities. I was in an office block not too far from here. Most of you will know it's called Cardinal Square. It's 100,000 square feet of office space, owned by Nerton Developments. There's a lot of different companies in there. The NHS are in there as well. And they had just invested a significant amount of money in the Quad, which sits in the heart of that centre. Now, many of you have probably had meetings in that building over the past few years. I urge you to go back and have a look at that picture there. We will be doing a bondholder event, but it's a company that's invested in the public realm within the office complex itself as part of their strategy to curate the office for people. And what they've noticed is it's started to attract a lot more people back from work from home, coming into the office more often because of the experience that they can have there. When you leave today, if you're in the Quad, you will receive a few documents, as you always do when you come to a Marketing Derby event. We have the new investment prospectus for the city and for the county. We have a new development map for the city and for the county. And also the current edition of Innovate magazine, which features a lot of the themes that we're talking about today, including some of the speakers, very much a focus on experience. Also today, particularly with the Q&A with Paul Simpson, we'll be talking about the investment momentum that's happening in the city, and that again is covered in the magazine. What I will say, it is impressive, it's ongoing, but we're not finished, so it is a work in progress. When I go to another city, I always ask myself 2 questions. One is, what drives this place, and where does the money come from? Really important questions when you go somewhere. And in Derby's case, the answer to the question remains that we are a global hub, really, for advanced manufacturing. What this shows, and some of you will have seen this slide before, each circle is one of the cities in the UK. The bigger the circle, the bigger the city. So you can see London in the bottom corner. It's produced by Centre for Cities, and it shows Derby as an outlier in the economy. An economy which is based on high-tech advanced manufacturing. And of course what that means is we're a talent-hungry economy, and it leads to the salaries that, again, you'll hear has been talked about by some of the speakers later in the session. The average salary in Derby for jobs in Derby is over £36,000 against a national average of £29,000. And you can see from that slide, we're better than, but we're with the Oxfords and the Cambridges and the Aberdeens of the world, kind of outlier on our own. And the reason for that, obviously, is because of the slide I just showed you before. And finally, kind of from an economic point of view, it's tough times, but we are in the good region. We sit in a place that's on the up, the East Midlands. You can see that it's one of only 2 English regions that's looking to close the gap with London. So that, for me, is a really important context for the work that we do here. So finally, from me, I just want to invite you all to come across the road after this morning to the Derby City Lab. It's a new initiative which we're opening today. It's a partnership with the University of Derby, with Latham's, with the City Council, and with Clowes Developments. And it sits on St James's Street, the building there in the middle you can see. And we kind of looked at different labs around the world. And, over time, I've seen one in London, in Amsterdam, in Shanghai. And we kind of thought, it's time for Derby to have this, something which engages the people in the future of the place. There's so much change going on in Derby that we want people to be able to engage with it, learn more about it, but also help shape it. So that's the purpose of the Derby City Lab. And we are a city which we campaign as a city of innovation. And I think that this is another example, this public-private partnership, of that type of innovation. So it has within it the Marketing Derby Investor Showcase. It has a pop-up exhibition, which at the moment is Down to Earth in Eden. We'll hear more about that later. And the university is opening one of its VR showcases in there as well, with some of the projects of the future and visions for the future outlined. So a really exciting space to actually start that conversation. So I urge you you're very welcome to come over straight after the session and have a look what we're up to down there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce us now, as is now tradition at the Derby Property Summit, to our host for the day, Declan Curry. We were trying to work out earlier, is it Declan's 7th, 8th or 9th, so we'll settle on 8th, Derby Property Summit. He's a friend of the city. He's been up and down to these summits, and he's seen lots of the changes that are happening in the city. And he told me recently, some of the visions that he saw as CGIs a few years ago, now he can see on the construction and so on and so forth. Declan will be known to most of you from the BBC as business correspondent and also LBC. And I said, how do you want me to introduce you? He said, say as little as possible, so I have. So please welcome for the rest of the session, Declan Curry.
John, thank you very much. Thank you, John, and hello, everyone. And may I add my own welcome to the Derby Property Summit. It is always a delight to be back in this great city and this great county once again. I'm Declan Curry. As John said, I've been reporting on business, the economy and politics, what he was too polite to say for nearly 30 years now, and you'll hear me most days on LBC and some other stations. But I'm delighted to be here today as your host, and I'm as excited as you are to hear what our excellent speakers will have to say. We welcome all our guests, those of you here at the Sir John Hurt Cinema at the Quad, and those of you who are joining us online, either in real time or later on catch-up. Sir John learnt his love of the cinema here in Derby as a child, visiting many of the city's many picture houses. He was a massive fan and a patron of the Quad, and was very pleased to see the positive developments underway in Derby. As John said, we think this is my 8th year. We may have miscounted a little, and the progress that I've seen in Derby in that time has been both obvious and tremendous. This year, we're going to look at how we repurpose towns and cities in the post-pandemic world, how we recalibrate that balance between residential, office, retail and the grand public spaces. And we're going to focus on Derby and Derbyshire's £2 billion investment pipeline. Our keynote speakers today are Courtney Fingar from the Global Media Investment Monitor. Courtney's a long-time friend of the Derby Property Summit. You'll have heard her speak here in previous years, and yet again she brings her global experience of urban places, and we're delighted to welcome her back. We also have Paul Simpson, the Chief Executive of Derby City Council, and he brings his unrivaled local and regional perspective. We also this year have two contributions from some of the biggest names in recent modern British economic development. We have the wonderful Sir Tim Smith of Eden Project fame, and Lord O'Neill, Jim O'Neill, who's passionate about British cities. He's one of the key drivers of the success of the Northern Powerhouse. And both of them have points to make from their positions that are sharply relevant to Derby and Derbyshire today. We'll also hear from four voices from your community, very much engaged with local projects, and then we'll be joined by the leader of Derby Council, Councillor Chris Poulter, joining us once again this year, this time with a special appeal. I won't give any spoilers before then. We say a big thank you to our summit partners, our associate partners, our Faithful and Gould and Atkins. Faithful and Gould's a world-leading integrated project and programme consultancy with 2,300 employees. It's part of the global business SMC Lavan. And its sister organisation, Atkins, is one of the world's most respected design, engineering and project management consultancies. Both businesses engaged in projects in Derby and are active supporters of the city's place ambitions. We also have two brand partners. One is AJS Structural Design, Derby-based. AJS offers civil and structural engineering design services for residential, commercial, retail and leisure sectors across the United Kingdom. And also our brand partner, Matthew Montague Associates. Montague's well known and respected as one of the region's leading practices, and most recently worked with on the city campus master plan for the University of Derby. The support of all four of them essential in making this event happen, and I know that you'll join me in thanking them. Let's give them a round of applause. So we encourage you, whether you're here in the room in the quad with me, or whether you're watching us live online, remotely in your home or your office, we encourage you to take a full and vigorous part in today's discussion. And we'll do that using the website Slido. That's the place where you ask your questions and you share your observations. So wherever your web browser is, at home, it'll probably be on your computer. Here in the hall, if you could take out your phones or your tablets, please. Open up your web browser. Type in the address bar slido.com. It'll ask for an event code. That is DPS 2022. DPS 2022. If you could do that now, because I've got some questions that I want you to answer. So get Slido up and running on your browser, on your phone, on your tablet, on your laptop or computer. You use the Q&A tab to ask your questions whenever you like, when people are speaking. Other people will be able to see your question, and you can vote on questions that other people have asked if you want to indicate that that's something you'd like an answer to as well. But right now there are two questions that I want to ask to you. So if you can go to the polls tab on Slido, slido.com, event code DPS 2022, click on polls, and if we're all ready, we will have the first question. And we want you to select one of the suggested answers. By the end of the season, Derby County will be 1 promoted, 2 in the playoffs, 3 mid-table, 4 relegated. Submit your vote. Let's see what numbers are coming in. Excuse me for turning my back on you. It's the only way I can see what you're saying. 44%, 45% of you saying promoted. Shame on the 9% of you who have said relegated. So thank you for that. Let's move on to the second question. Remember, anyone voting in this, you can vote on this at home or in your office as well as here in the hall. This one is perhaps a little bit more relevant to our business today. The purpose for the priority for repurposing Derby City Centre is 1, more city living, 2, more city workers, 3, more city visitors, or 4, a safer, more attractive city experience. So 1, living, 2, workers, 3, visitors, 4, the experience. And if I turn my back on you again, you see that there's an overwhelming vote for a more attractive city experience, roughly 70% of you voting for that. I'm just going to make a little note of these numbers, if you don't mind, because we will come back to this point over and over during our discussion. And I'm going to ask you this question again at the end of the day, just to see if the discussion has moved the needle. So thank you for that, and thank you, Andrew. I've got the numbers as well. So those are our first two questions of the day. We now move on to discuss repurposing, and we will take a global perspective on this. First of all, Derby, as with all cities, is having to rethink its city centre and repurpose it, striking a new balance between living, working, visiting, and the experience of place. Our first speaker, Courtney Fingar, will bring us a global perspective on this. Courtney is Editor-in-Chief of Investment Monitor. That's a digital publication focused on foreign direct investment. It launched in 2020. It's part of Global Data PLC. Courtney previously spent 15 years with the Financial Times, and you're an expert on FDI, and also you've advised parliamentary committees, and you've been at the Derby Property Summit on previous occasions. We're delighted to have you back again with us this year. Let's give her a round of applause. Courtney Fingar.
Thank you very much, Declan, and thank you, John and team, for having me back. Yes, I have, I guess it would be a struggle to say I advise the Parliament on FDI, because I do speak, they never listen, but I try. Yes, as Declan kindly introduced me, I'm a global expert, I suppose we can use that word, on foreign direct investment. So what I thought I would do is give a big international view. I'll talk a little bit about how that applies to the UK. Then we'll narrow it down a little bit further and talk about what it means for cities, and of course including cities such as this one. First, we'll give the global landscape for FDI. What are we seeing? I'll just give the caveat that what I'm going to present largely is based on data. That is, our business is data journalism. I'll try not to give you too many, boring charts and graphs, but just to tell you that what I'm presenting, especially as relates to FDI, is based on either global flows of FDI, that includes what we call headline FDI flows, that includes M&A, as well as greenfield FDI. Greenfield in particular, when I talk about that term, it doesn't mean greenfield in a real estate sense, about where you put it on a plot of land that's been used before or not. In FDI world, greenfield means a new physical presence of a company or an expansion of an existing facility. It's all about headcount, adding new jobs. So those are my disclaimers. This is what we're seeing as we look around, and as we look in particular, we have our own database that's tracking greenfield FDI, so where companies are setting up facilities. What did we see last year? And we usually look at the figures from the previous year because it takes some time for the dust to settle. There was some good news that after some pretty ugly years, we did see an increase in greenfield FDI. Software and IT services tends to be the biggest generator by number of projects. It's just they're more prolific. You tend to see smaller projects by tech companies, but more of them. Big drivers of FDI in terms of what companies are looking for, it's all about customers, so that's market-seeking FDI, and talent, going where the workforce is. And I'll circle back to that because the challenge now is figuring out where that talent is, now that it's dispersed a little bit. The largest source of greenfield FDI, is the US. That means American companies are still the most active in international expansion. And it's also the biggest destination. Now, big at the company level, a major driver, no pun intended, of FDI is Tesla. And Tesla has been in a period of frenetic activity setting up facilities. That can be infrastructure, EV charging stations, and gigafactories, and so on. So it's a major investor to watch. So this is a happy chart. I went around showing some pretty depressing slides after the big global crash in FDI that came as a result of the pandemic. So you can see that big dip that happened in 2020 as the pandemic took hold. We saw a very healthy rebound last year. This is headline FDI flow. So again, this includes M&A activity as well as this greenfield activity of setting up physical facilities. This is the figures from the OECD. What's driving FDI, or the macro factors that are impacting right now? Of course, we're still dealing with the implications of COVID and all the changes that brought. War in Ukraine is proving a major disruptor and is actually threatening this nice, beautiful bounce that we saw in FDI flows because of the instability, but more importantly, its impact and how it might hit global growth, because GDP and FDI are in a happy little relationship together, and they tend to go in tandem. So when there are threats to economic growth, they're usually threats to FDI. Supply chain disruptions are something that took place as a result of COVID and accentuated a lot of trends that were already happening in terms of shortening supply chains and a total rethink that companies were undergoing as to how they move their goods around the world and therefore where they do production. And just as we were trying to make some sense of that, the war has caused further shortages and supply chain disruptions. So this is a real movable feast, and companies are still trying to figure out the strategies. Automation in Industry 4.0 was, again, an existing trend that's been accentuated by COVID and has major implications for production centers. Now, remote working goes without saying. This causes a fundamental rethink of where talent is, how office space is used, and therefore where companies locate. I'll get into that a little bit further. Sustainability and ESG is impacting heavily on not just corporate behavior and what companies care and think about, but also where and how they invest. Many inward investment agencies now have remits that they're trying to be more selective about the types of investment they attract, and companies are trying to be very careful about where they invest and how, and showing that their investments are put to good productive use and meet ESG, environmental, social, and governance criteria. Inflation is now running rampant and is proving yet another disruptor to global investment flows and threatening global growth, and has major implications for corporate liquidity, but also salaries and the cost equations that companies make about where and how they invest. And just related to sustainability and ESG, but I gave it its own bullet point because it's so important, the race to net zero, of course, is impacting every aspect of business, including where companies set up their facilities and how they invest. This is just a word cloud and a few points in our company, in our larger company, Global Data. We have a company's analytics database, and we track earnings calls and look out for corporate sentiment, and we can measure it this way. And this gives us an eye into what companies care about and also what they are worried about at this moment in time. So we found that business sentiment, which had been looking pretty bullish, is now a little bit flat. And you can see the words that are leaping out are not necessarily happy ones. Inflation, pricing, shortages, supply chain are coming up again and again. Also, ESG is looming large, sort of further to my previous point about the importance. Now, when it comes to talent, again, it's all about workforce, or primarily about workforce when it comes to thinking about site selection and where companies expand. So it's really important to understand what skills are they seeking, because this also has relevance for worker training and education. And it's probably no surprise that AI jobs are in big demand globally. So of course this means that any location competing for investment needs to make sure that its educational system, technical schools, and worker training are all geared towards preparing an adequate workforce with AI skills. This again comes from our data where we track job postings globally, and we find that as a percentage of all new job postings globally, of all sectors and all types of jobs, AI is growing at the fastest rate. I mentioned earlier about Tesla, and I like this slide just because when we think about drivers of investment, what kind of projects are out there, what kind of projects are being most actively sought by investment promoters, is all about gigafactories these days. Now, some of it is because of the kind of sexy nature of it. Who doesn't want to land a big modern gigafactory? The good news is there are more of them than ever before, and they are multiplying rapidly around the world. We are predicting that gigafactory capacity is going to explode over the next 10 years. That means there will be more gigafactories around the world. They might be smaller than the ones we see see today, but there will be more of them. And of course, when I'm talking about gigafactories, I mean these are focused on electric vehicles. Now, to date, China has been the world leader in attracting these projects, but Germany and other places in Europe are making an incredibly strong play, and we expect that Europe will become an increasingly important player in the gigafactory market. So that's the global picture. If we think about what this means for the UK, as it happens, DIT released its figures, I think it was last week, and they're reporting over the previous year a 3% year-on-year increase in projects. The happy news related to this is that job creation, so jobs that are actually coming as a result of foreign direct investment projects, grew 57%. Now, I guess there's a caveat. There are many, many ways of measuring FDI, and so you will have inward investment agencies at the national and subnational level that are reporting their own figures and using their own calculations about what counts as FDI. Are we talking greenfield? Are we talking portfolio investment? Are we talking M&A? And then you have, I guess, independent figures using their own calculations, such as those that we produce and OECD and so on. So it's not to cast any doubt on these figures. It's just to say it's very hard to measure like for like in the way that, for example, our figures for the UK based on the UK's own figures. But it's important to look at what the government is reporting. Now, the UK FDI was in for a rocky time as a result of the Brexit referendum, and we saw that after 2006, immediately a fairly large decline in inward investment into the UK as companies kind of process the shock of that decision and try to decide what to do. And then this has been compounded by the uncertainty around COVID. So in many ways, the UK, when it comes to uncertainty, is dealing with a 1-2 punch of lingering uncertainty about Brexit and what it entails and what it means, and the global uncertainty unleashed by COVID. All that aside, the UK remains a highly attractive destination for foreign direct investment. Still leads Europe by quite a long way as a destination for inward investment projects. And many of the fundamentals of the country's investment proposition remain intact regardless of Brexit or trade agreements or anything. And that is to do with its location, the rule of law, and its, I guess, overall pro-business regulatory environment. However, there are questions that are still in many ways unanswered about the workforce. The UK is a magnet for global talent, but we're still assessing, again, what Brexit means for that. Trade access to, in particular, the UK's largest market being Europe, has taken a hit, and that has implications for foreign direct investment. So we've not really solved all of those riddles yet, but again, the good news is UK FDI overall is holding up fairly well against some extremely difficult headwinds. And just to kind of summarize a little bit the way that we can look at it, as I mentioned, the strong figures that have been reported are testaments to some kind of enduring appeal that the UK has as a destination for inward investment. And what we've seen is, since the referendum, we are seeing many smaller projects coming into the UK, and this is when the figures themselves, in terms of numbers of projects, is okay. They are smaller in nature, and that's because in some ways there's a global trend of that happening as companies try to hedge against risk, but we're seeing it very notably in the UK, this hedging, because you would now need some operations in the UK, but you need to start to think where else in Europe you might need those operations as well, instead of going all in on the UK. It's fair to say that that trend works in reverse as well. Because of the, I guess, breaking of access to Europe, companies that want to do business in Europe as well as the UK can no longer just have a facility elsewhere in Europe, in the EU. They need to have one in the UK as well if they want to serve this market. Now, in terms of what comes next, we're expecting that after that nice rebound, the party is over. Inflation, the war in Ukraine, a decline in global GDP, and all of these factors, and the cost of living crisis, and all of this is going to hit global FDI flows we are predicting. And so along with that, there's probably going to be a decline in most of the major FDI destinations worldwide. In the UK in particular, as I mentioned, we haven't solved a lot of the Brexit questions. Investors do not like uncertainty, so they often hold back and act cautious until they figure out the lay of the land. Continuing issues around the Northern Ireland Protocol and other aspects that remain in flux are going to cause still a bit of nervousness. And then, of course, we have this looming question about Scottish independence. Now, none of this will destroy the UK's attractiveness for investment by any means, but it poses some question marks and a bit of uncertainty. The FDI landscape globally is in a huge amount of flux, mainly because of those macro factors that I showed you a few slides ago. But we think this transition is going to happen quicker in the UK than many other places, and some of that is to the UK's benefit because the industries of the future and those that are the major drivers of FDI, but that are also in a period of quick evolution, like renewable energy, battery technology, and AI, make up a very large percentage of the UK's inward FDI. And the UK is a leader in all of these areas, so that means that in a time of global evolution in terms of FDI, the UK has a major role to play and in many ways is leading the pack. So if we bring it down a little bit to a more local aspect, what I find really fascinating right now in this moment of time is how the role of cities is changing. Now, cities are the major destinations for inward FDI. Now, occasionally you get big production facilities and other investments that take place in rural areas or outside cities, but largely investment goes to the cities because it's where the infrastructure is, it's where the people are, and so on. But we have to now rethink the entire purpose of the city, which is, I suppose, the topic of this whole event. And there are many implications for FDI. The city's centers will change, their purpose will change. There's a fundamental rethink now in how to use corporate real estate. How much of it do you need? What's the role of the office? Does the city now become a meeting point, a hub, as opposed to places with large office space where people come and spend all their time Monday to Friday, and therefore you need the space for that, you need the services. If people are scattering, now what we don't know is remote working, is it a fad? Probably not entirely. Now, we won't all be working from our home offices now. Many people have returned to work. But they're not returning to work in exactly the same way. I think anecdotally we can probably agree most people are now working from home at least part of the week. So this causes a rethink, not just about cities themselves, office space, commercial space, all those retail facilities, leisure facilities that were geared towards capturing people as they come out of their office at 5 or 6. All that has to change. From an FDI perspective, it has enormous implications for corporate site selection because talent is a major attraction for FDI. It's all about going where the workers are. But what happens if the talent pool is dispersed? It's now beads of water kind of rolling across a sidewalk. It's no longer this one consolidated pool sitting within clearly defined bounds. So I find interesting and completely unresolved because nobody knows the answer to this. How do inward investment promoters, for example, now calculate their talent pool? How do you claim where the bounds of your talent are? We usually talk about in catchment areas, but what if your catchment area is now scattered far and wide? Just as a personal example, I've spent most of the pandemic living between the UK, Italy, and for a time Poland. So, and on any given week, I could be now in any number of countries. So who counts me as talent? You know, who claims me? Is it my local municipality in Italy? Half the time they don't know I'm there, but they could claim me if they wanted because I sit there doing my Zooms 50% of the time. Does London count me? Does Poland count me for the months that I spend there? It's okay, not everyone lives this extreme digital nomad example, but I think on a smaller scale, that plays out over and over. So we have to really think about how we measure talent, how we think about talent, and where it's located. But this changes also companies' calculations. So if you're going to the talent, first of all, do you need to go to the talent in quite the same way? You can hire workers from around the world and have them join you digitally. And if so, where is the talent? Where are they located? It's all completely fascinating to me, and that probably warrants its own discussion on its own right. And it comes up a lot. You know, I've just sort of concluding the conference circuit globally over these past few months, and nobody has an answer to these questions. But we need to find the answers if we're going to measure properly, again, talent and also cultivate that talent. Another aspect that I find interesting that's related to this is nearly every city around the world either claims to be a tech hub or has aspirations to be a tech hub. But is everywhere now a tech hub? Because what does that even mean? We are all now reliant on technology. We're all sort of a digitalized workforce in some form or fashion. I should say there's a carve out for certain types of functions, like being in a production facility. You need to physically be there. There are many jobs where you can't just sit and Zoom from home. We have to acknowledge that. But ICT infrastructure is now the most crucial, or say one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial, criteria that companies need. So you have to have literally the bandwidth to operate. So every city has had to get up to speed, and even rural areas have had to make sure that their ICT infrastructure is adequate. Everybody's working digitally. So what does a hub even mean in this day and age, again, where people and functions are scattered? And does that mean that everywhere is now, in some form or fashion, a tech hub? I find this quite interesting. And then getting, I guess, a little bit closer to even the title of this event, and Declan mentioned it already, and that is the repurposing of office space. If we rethink the role of the office, then we have to rethink, of course, office space, but then we also have to rethink everything around it. Again, the retail, the leisure, all of which was designed in most city centers for the idea of those workers who were going to be there Monday to Friday all day, popping out, getting a sandwich at Pret, maybe going for drinks afterwards. So we need to be very attuned to the way that the workforce is changing, to the habits and the way that they're changing, and then make sure that our city centers and all the facilities and the real estate space actually is fit for purpose in terms of the way that people are now living and working. And again, all of this brings to mind the role of cities themselves. So they've always been the hotspots of FDI. Now that will continue in some way, but it's clear that the role of the city is changing, both as recipients of FDI, but as places where people live and work and congregate. So we need essentially to be able to take a step back and study these trends and really digest what they mean for the needs of companies, also what it means for the needs of investors, and really design our cities and our spaces accordingly. But I think taking a step back and digesting these trends is the essential part, because otherwise we're just reacting too quickly. And the way to do this, and the way to rethink these strategies and to shape the future of the cities, and also to succeed at an investment destination, is to leverage the inward investment agencies, the marketing Darbies of the world, and have them work hand in hand with urban planners and the city officials, but in very close consultation with the companies, the universities, those who are creating the workforce and the skills, and all heads pretty much have to come together to think carefully about these changes, to think where we might be in 5 or 10 years, and try to design the investment proposition, but also the physical spaces of the city to be fit for the way that workers are going to interact with these spaces, to where talent will or will not be, the needs of industry in terms of that talent, but also in terms of their physical space. So I'm glad to have an event like this, because it is essential to really think about this and to, again, leverage all the brains of the city and all the stakeholders, or the bondholders, as the term goes here, to make sure that everybody is unified in a strategy, because these are complex questions that nobody really has an answer to. I think one strategy is to also look internationally. It's important to point out that all cities globally are grappling with these questions and these challenges. Of course, every place is unique, and there are major differences based on how large a city is or whether it's in a developed economy or a developing economy, but these challenges are universal. So studying best practice and actually exchanging ideas with like-minded and similar cities globally is really essential. And one that, there are a few that would come to mind, but I was quite struck. I was in Poland a couple months ago in the city of Łódź, and it's very similar to Derby in a lot of ways. They also were a major industrial center, had to rethink when the I guess the nature of the production facilities, there was a period of some decline in a post-industrial time period, but they are no longer post-industrial, they are current industrial, as Derby is. Even the look of it, there were red brick buildings, and there's a lot of clever thought going into repurposing production facilities, rethinking the city center, moving into the modern era. So I would say, John, if you've not gone over to Łódź, I'm going to send you there on a study. But again, thinking of cities that are similar in their makeup and similar in their challenges, and studying what they're doing is a way to deal with these big macro issues. Now, I've kind of whizzed through a lot of big topics in a relatively short amount of time, but I didn't want to kind of bore you too much with that, but I'm really open to any further discussion or questions. I'm sure Declan will hit me with one or two, but thank you for the time and your attention.
Courtney, thank you very much. And forgive the informality, but as we discussed earlier, the heat, we don't know how to cope.
No,
in
be
this,
as informal and comfortable as you like.
in this country. Just picking up on that very last point, because it was such an interesting one, cities across the world are asking themselves this question: what has changed since coronavirus? How do we need to adapt? You mentioned one example that John and the others should look at, and you'll send him on a study trip. Are there common themes from them, from those cities that are adapting really well? You know, are they coming to the conclusion that the very purpose of the city needs to change completely? It's not about office and commercial anymore to the same degree.
Yes, I think those that are coping more successfully are those that are neither being overly reactive, and you can't take a knee-jerk approach, saying, "Oh my gosh, no, the office is dead." You know, there was a lot of that kind of talk, especially in the early days of the pandemic. So we need to rethink everything, and we don't need offices anymore. But equally, others put their head in the sand, and many said, no, it's a fad. Everybody's going to go back to work. It's going to be like, we're just going to get over this and pretend that these 2 years didn't happen. And so the middle ground, like always, is the sensible place to be, which is why I argue for, taking a step back. So we have to acknowledge that things have changed fundamentally, and they probably won't change back. But we have to take a step back and see which of these trends are everlasting, and how will companies operate and workers operate in 5 years and 10 years. And in some ways you can't entirely predict that, but we can see where things are headed, we can see how people are working, and we can try to be adaptive. So I think it's to be adaptive and flexible, but not reactive.
Okay, thank you. Let's bring up some of your questions that you've been asking using Slido. Slido.com is the address that you've been using, and you've been asking lots of different questions as well. I'm just looking to see if the questions can go up on a screen, or if they have appeared on a screen. I'll read them out. This one from Matt Wheatley. Has COVID accelerated existing trends towards digital supported dispersed working, or is it just a temporary disruption in normal working?
Good question. I think it did accentuate a number of trends. There were several, as I mentioned, there were already trends that were happening around supply chain shortening, nearshoring, automation, for example, and digital working. And COVID just sort of hit the speed at a rapid pace. And that's why I think that there is a fundamental change there that that we won't go back from. So it was already a thought around using more digital tools, to communicate, but also in investment promotion, to have internal meetings and so on. But what happened is that trend that was maybe just bubbling along at a slightly slow pace, but that was happening, just suddenly took off. And I think that the genie is now out of the bottle and won't go back in. There are certain things that we learned that we can do digitally that we realize is just more efficient.
And just following on from that, another question from our audience. Are cities like Derby, with their emphasis on advanced manufacturing, are they slightly more sheltered from that trend?
A little bit, because places like Derby were kind of doing Industry 4.0 before it was cool. So there are other places in the world that weren't really thinking in that way and have now very quickly got to get up to speed. Derby was already thinking about that and already moving in that direction, and therefore it was a bit well placed to capture, I guess, that trend of Industry 4.0, but also the modern way the companies are thinking about how and where they do production.
Okay. Courtney Finger, great to hear from you. Thank you for being back with us again this year. Ladies and gentlemen, Courtney
Finger. Thanks very much.
So we now have the third question that we want to ask you using Slido. So if you could once again open up your browsers, whether you're here in the room using your mobile or your tablets, or whether you're at home using your computer or your laptop, Slido.com, the event code DPS 2022. And this is the third question that we want to ask you. And it follows on from Courtney's comments that this is a chance to think about international inward investment. How can our offer to attract foreign direct investment be more competitive? It's one, if you think it is the availability of local funding initiatives. Two, if you think that we need to focus on specific sector clusters. Three, if you think the answer is a better range of property options. And four, if it's advanced R&D support. So how can Derby's offer to attract foreign direct investment be more competitive? One, local funding initiatives. Two, specific sector clusters. Three, property options. Four, enhanced support for research and development. And just, pardon me, will I turn my back on you once again for the result, perhaps unsurprisingly for a property summit. Nearly 40% if you say better property options, but a strong showing for local funding initiatives and for specific sector clusters as well. So very much a demand there for a mixed economy approach to the sweetening the offer for FDI. Thank you for your votes. Now we have a rather special moment in the summit. We all know the Eden project in Cornwall. I'm guessing many of us have visited it. The guiding mind behind it, the man behind it, is Sir Tim Smith. Now, over the last year, Sir Tim has been providing support to a brilliant local initiative called Down to Earth Derby. And a few weeks ago, Sir Tim and his top team came to Derby on a visit to assess the city's potential for land-based regeneration. Let's see and hear what he has to say.
Hello, I'm Tim Smith from the Eden Project, speaking to you from my office here in Cornwall. I've recently returned here from having spent the most splendid few days up in your wonderful city of Derby, enjoying conversations with our friends at the council and Down to Earth, and engaging also in a big community consultation project to explore whether there's excitement and an appetite for doing something rather extraordinary in Derby. And we believe that you have a city with marvellous bones and the most fantastic river and some sites which maybe have seen better days, but they offer an opportunity for reimagining Derby for the future. We all know that we're living at times where the challenges of both climate change and environmental degradation as a whole are channeling many of our thoughts into what does a green future look like. What better city in which to be having those considerations than in the city which, if you like, gave birth to the Lunar Society, basically the parents of what we call the Enlightenment. And I like to think, as we strolled around Derby and looked at that magnificent river meandering through your city, with the islands of degradation that could be turned into beautiful things, that we're right in the place that should be becoming famous for the green enlightenment. A university hungry to develop things, a council which, despite its political balance, has actually got the interest of Derby at its heart, a number of property owners willing to consider doing unusual things, and a wealth of environmental and technical talent at our disposal. I would say to our friends in Derby who are interested in the property sphere, let's get together and explore whether we can come up with the most extraordinary master plan ever imagined in any city in Europe. Believe me, all we need is for us to believe in it. And if everybody believes in it, like Tinkerbell, it will come to life. So I look forward to seeing whether we can get some lots of new partnerships together and begin on this extraordinary journey. I'm 67. I don't want to wait a long time to do this. It's now or never. But I'd love to join you. Thanks very much.
Well, such wonderful, inspiring comments, and what a concept from Sir Tim Smith. A city with great bones, with areas that can be developed into beautiful things. And as Sir Tim says, the essential elements are already there. The university, the council, the property owners, and a wealth of talent. Let's get together, he says. All we need for it to happen is for us to believe in it. Well, the man in the driving seat for repurposing Derby is the Chief Executive of the Council, Paul Simpson. Last year at the summit, he outlined a post-COVID vision for Derby based on building confidence, diversifying and decarbonising. What purpose has been made? He's back with us again this year to update us. Please welcome the Chief Executive of Derby City Council, Paul Simpson. And Paul, you're very welcome. Just a reminder that your questions are welcome as well on Slido here in the room or at home. It's slido.com. The event code is DPS 2022. So, Paul, let's start first of all with the green-blue theme. We talked last year about the use of rivers and the use of trees and nature. Talk me through some of the schemes that you're working on. First of all, the first slide that we have here is Park.
Yeah, thank you, and great to be back. I said before, people must be getting sick and tired of me being up here, but never mind. So this is Allestree Park. It's our largest bit of green space. We're on a large local nature reserve, but of course had a golf course on it, which closed about 18 months ago. We took the decision, working in partnership with Derbyshire Wildlife Trust, to look at the possibility of rewilding it. Very quickly, we worked with the Wildlife Trust, with the university, but also an organisation called Rewilding Britain, who came and looked at the site. And within kind of 10 minutes of seeing it, the managing director of UK Rewilding turned to me and said, this has the possibility of being the UK's largest urban rewilding project, which my eyes kind of lit up at that point. So we've had a public consultation underway, which closed a few weeks ago, and we are due to be bringing a report back to Cabinet over the course of the next few weeks in terms of what the next steps will be of bringing forward that vision.
And from green to blue, in common with many cities across the country, we sort of turned our backs on our rivers, and now we're realising that they are a great sort of sparkling jewel in the middle of our cities. What are your plans for integrating rivers into city life?
Yeah, I mean, there's some potentially huge opportunities for the river, ranging from the river boat, which launched in the autumn of last year. We're looking to obviously facilitate boat rides on the city, right through to city centre living on rivers, which we've seen be hugely successful in other major cities across the UK and Europe and across the world. Water is a thing that does attract people. It brings people together, and it is an incredible opportunity for us to use and face into the river like we've said. We've turned our back on it. Let's face into it. Let's create that space where people can use the waterways both to live and to enjoy, bars and restaurants. That's the kind of vision for the future that I would want to see along Derby's waterfront.
And there are, of course, other types of water. We have the brook in the city. How are you bringing that blue space back into an attractive element of Derby's offer?
Yes, I mean, there was reference earlier to the Innovate magazine, wasn't there? And these are some of the visuals that are in the Innovate magazine, which I think are just incredible. If we can make this happen, it would be fantastic for Derby. At the bottom of St James's Street, opposite the new performance venue. This would be the degulverting of the Markeaton Brook, which runs all the way from Markeaton Park, through the city, underneath the city, and out into the River Derwent. And at the moment, which a lot of people don't really know, there is already a large space that is open and is green, has got wildlife on it. I sometimes cycle into the city to work and pass on my way and go past it. It's a beautiful part of the city. It's really peaceful and serene, and obviously we're allowing nature back into urban environments, which I think is really, really important.
It's about breaking up the concrete.
Correct. Yeah, absolutely. And again, giving people a reason. We saw from the poll that John did at the beginning, people want more of this kind of space, and this is what we would like to bring to Derby.
Just one quick question already in from Slido. Is rewilding just a new way for local authorities to not spend money on keeping places tidy?
Yeah, that comment's been made a number of times. It absolutely isn't that. This is about doing what I've just said. This is about enabling wild spaces. Nature has been, on this planet a lot longer than we have. It knows how to do it far better than we do.
We've just done it in my local area in London as well, and the impact it's had is just amazing. And you almost need to see it to believe it, to see just the beauty that can take form and shape where before there was none. Slido.com for your comments, cynical or otherwise, in this discussion. Moving on to the investment pipeline, let's look at some of the schemes coming down the line. Moorways, first of all, we talked about a massive investment in sports facilities last year. What's the update?
Yeah, I mean, I think the great thing about this year's Property Summit, and I said this to John when we were planning it, the last couple of years has been artists' impressions. We've now got buildings, we've now got photos, and this is an investment of regional significance. It's an incredible facility, I was really proud to be part of the opening ceremony. Everybody's worked really, really hard. We've got a great partnership with the team down there operating it on our behalf. It's just an amazing facility, and I think we've had over 30,000 visitors in the first few weeks that it's been open. So it's great to see the narrative, not just the fact that these facilities are there, but the narrative changing. The history of Derby, certainly in my recent experience, has been nothing ever happens in Derby, and I've said it here before. Well, actually, we're now beginning to prove those people wrong, that things do happen in this city. This is a shiny example of that.
Then the Market Hall, just around the corner from here, immense potential there.
Yes, the first phase of the regeneration of the Market Hall is now complete. So the external refurbishment, the roof and the interior painting of the ceiling has already been recently completed. We're now going to be working on the interior in terms of bringing forward a vision that hopefully looks something like that, because that's exactly what a modern space like that should be. It should be a mixed-use space, creativity, hospitality, food, drink, entertainment space, and we're now 2 years closer to that space being reopened in 2024, which again will be another major landmark in terms of the things that we said we're going to do that we've delivered. Interesting
you described it as a modern place, because you could look at it and say it's just tarting up another bit of Victoriana and it's appealing to nostalgia. That's not at all the objective.
No, I mean, Derby has got some incredible architecture, some incredible historical buildings, but they need to be repurposed. And we should respect the history, but provide the opportunity for a new lease of life, and that's exactly what we want for this space.
And then performance venues and Beckett Well, we've talked about this in the past.
Yes, and again, Beckett Well, the residential development, which you can see just on the left-hand side of the picture, you know, the external brickwork is now underway on that site. That should be complete early next year, which is fantastic. And of course, the demolition work on the old Pink Coconut site and the old Pennine Hotel site, where the new performance venue will go, is now underway. And so work will start on that in earnest early in the new year, and we expect the work to be complete late 2024, early 2025.
Okay, I want to move on to talk about funding bids and bids you're making to the government for Level Up funding. You've got 3 bids in submission already. On Slido, a question: what is the plan for the assembly buildings? Well, here they are.
Yes, the Levelling Up Fund bids, we've got 3, as you've said. For me, the most prominent of those is for this site. This should be the heart and soul of Derby. This site is such a fantastic site, right in the heart of the city centre.
It's been empty for, what, 10 years now?
Indeed, it has. So the Levelling Up Fund bid will be working in partnership with the university again and the theatre to relocate the Derby Theatre from its existing site right into the heart of the city, and again supporting that emphasis around the cultural offer again that John's poll suggested is one of the main reasons why we will attract people back into the city. And I think, you know, those economic indicators, I talk about them a lot, and John's analysis is really helpful in that. We should have a thriving city centre given that economic background that we've got in this city. So there is a reason we don't, and it's for those reasons that were up on that slide. We need to therefore respond in a positive manner to attract the people of Derby and the surrounding areas back into our city centre, and this is certainly one of the ways in which I think we can do that really successfully.
You've mentioned Beckett Well already, but I'm just going to go back to it for a second, because you're seeking support for a hotel.
That's right, yeah. We lack a high-end hotel offer in the city. We've got a lot of international companies that have international visitors. They need places to stay, good quality places to stay. And again, that will support, of course, the arena. Those things should go hand in glove, as well as supporting those businesses in terms of good quality hotel accommodation. It will also meet the needs of people wanting to go to the arena when it opens.
And then a building which I'm afraid to say some people may describe as a terrible eyesore, Friargate Goods Yard. What's happening there?
Yes, this has long been a challenge for the city. Again, you know, an example of that incredible history that we've got in Derby. The Goods Yard was a key feature of the Industrial Revolution that Sir Tim talked about in terms of, you know, Derby's history, and obviously the railway industry in particular for this site. It's in urgent need of restoration, but it's been a long-standing challenge for the city. But we've now got a plan working with the owners of the site, Clowes Developments. This will be a subject of another Levelling Up Fund bid to renovate the site and bring a mix of residential and commercial development and bring that incredible building back into use.
We've learned not to just demolish and start again, that there is a value in retaining the history. Absolutely.
I mean, that would be an incredible space for maybe, you know, warehousing perhaps, or offices. And I know Clowes have got some great ideas as to what that space could be used for. But again, supporting that move towards bringing more people living and working in the city centre, the footfall, that circular economy will help rejuvenate the city centre in its entirety.
Okay, I'm looking anxiously at the clock, and I want to get out of the city centre and look at some of the other areas outside where progress has been made. Infinity Park, work there on a nuclear advanced manufacturing centre.
Yeah, and you know, even as this was being conceived, I think it just shows how quickly things are moving in this city at the moment. We've got the nuclear MRC, which will be fantastic in terms of supporting research and development in the nuclear industry. We've also, of course, working with Rolls-Royce, the university and others, and the MRC, on the Nuclear Training Academy, which will bring 200 graduates into the nuclear industry in this city. Derby could become the central focal point of the nuclear industry in the UK and beyond. I think that's a fantastic opportunity.
We could say more about it, but I'm afraid we have to talk about, to move on. And Smart Park, and there's a brand name that'll be familiar to some customers across the country, HelloFresh. A base here in Derby, is that right?
That's right, yeah. The first building, just over 2 years, it's taken from concept to building going up. And again, you know, I've mentioned already the image on the left was what we've seen before. The image on the right is the building that now exists in Spondon. And, you know, we should be really, really proud of the work that we've done with Jackie and her team and obviously colleagues at HelloFresh to bring that to fruition. And they've obviously also announced a further expansion of HelloFresh onto that site, which is great news.
And St Moten's Park, which has been sort of pretty much empty for so long, you can now see the activity there.
Yes, if you've not been down to Pride Park recently, you'll be astonished at the rate these buildings have gone up. It's incredible, actually. And we are in conversation with a number of organisations very interested in moving on to that site. And not necessarily just warehousing, but good quality jobs in terms of high-tech industry, again, which just exemplifies the reputation that this city's got for the high-end manufacturing that John referenced in his presentation.
And you can't come to Derby without mentioning the Save Derby County campaign. Successful, ultimately. Did that create a sense of Team Derby?
Yes, we use that phrase all the time, really, and it was used a lot. Obviously, we called ourselves Team Derby in terms of the lobbying we were doing behind the scenes with government and others, you know, like the EFL and other interested stakeholders, and obviously delighted that David and his organisation have stepped in and saved the club. It's great that David's obviously a big Derby County fan himself. He's a local businessman. We really look forward to working with him and his team because everybody knows that a successful football club in Derby County makes a successful city. And the fact that the people of Derby got behind the football club in such huge numbers is testament to the passion that people feel for their football club and they feel for this city. And we need to build on that because this is an incredibly passionate city. And on that, you know, building on that success, and that power and that passion, we can really take the city forward.
And that's the point. It's not just having a great sports team as part of the sense of place. It's bottling that community spirit and then using it, maximising it in other developments and other campaigns in the future. Can it be replicated?
I'm from Derby, and you know, one of the things that's really struck me since I've been doing this job is the passion that people have for this city. It is incredible, and it's taken, I have to be honest and say, it's taken me by surprise. So we do, that's a great phrase there, Declan, we need to bottle it, and we need to get this city behind us, and I'm not going to steal any of the leader's thunder, but I'm sure when you hear him speak later on, he'll be trying to do just that. So this, you know, we do need the people of Derby to get behind us. We don't get everything right. But I would like to think over the last few years we've made some really positive strides forward, and you know, we will continue to do the best that we can for this city.
Okay, a couple of comments from Slido. These aren't questions, I'm just going to read them out and you can do with them what you will. Derby needs boutique and experience hotels rather than more change. Osnabrück Square should be considered as part of the Market Hall regeneration. Are there any plans to reopen some tram lines? Are there?
Not
in your head.
That's a great question. Not that I'm aware of. But obviously, I mean, one of the things that people may not necessarily be aware of is the talks around devolution and the combined authority, and certainly public transport will feature heavily around our aspirations for improving public transport and the links between ourselves and Nottingham and elsewhere.
A call here for more sport in the city centre itself. Great to see more cyclists in Derby. Are there plans to develop more cycle lanes? And alongside that, then a request for more parking in Derby as well. Can you have both?
We've got a review underway right at the moment on car parking, a strategic review. A lot of our off-street car parking, the likes of Chapel Street, Bold Lane and places like that are looking a little tired. The buildings perhaps either need renovating or we need to be thinking of bringing on some newer capacity. There's obviously the perspective of having a car park on the Beckett site itself nearby to the arena. So car parking is something that we are looking at currently. There is a need to get the balance right. People will still want to drive, probably more in terms of electric vehicles. But yes, of course, we want to encourage more cycling as well. And just as a little bit of a teaser, there will hopefully be some interesting news around cycling in Derby very, very soon.
We will listen out for that. More electric vehicles, of course, means more charging points, which is another huge civic infrastructure challenge for local authorities all across the country. Perhaps we'll talk about that at another event. Free parking is what people said they wanted.
Yes, there is the push and pull factor around this, isn't there? And clearly, from our perspective, there is a need to strike the right balance between levying car parking charges that support the council to enable it to support local businesses and obviously the other services that we as a council we provide, but also we want to encourage people into the city centre. So I think our car parking rates are very competitive in comparison to other cities, and it's an ongoing challenge as we look to hopefully wean ourselves off vehicles that burn hydrocarbons and onto more sustainable modes of transport. But certainly it is about striking the right balance between supporting people to enable them to drive their cars in a sustainable way, but also encouraging people to take on more active modes of travel, cycling, walking and using good quality public transport.
Paul Simpson, Chief Executive of Derby City Council, thank you so much. Thank you very much. And thank you for your questions and your observations as well. We've shared as many of them as we could fit into the discussion. Now we have another question for you. This is the fourth of our questions, which we invite you to answer using Slido, slido.com in the browser. The event code is DPS2022. You click on the polls tab and you will find this question. Derby's priority for attracting visitors back into the city centre should be 1. More interesting things to do. 2. More independent shops and businesses. 3. Ensuring a safe, attractive experience. 4. Improved mobility, including public transport and better parking. You may, of course, think that you need more than one of those, but we want you to pick the one that you think should be the top priority. More interesting things to do, more independent shops and businesses, a safe, attractive experience, or improved mobility. Those are your choices, and your consensus almost is more interesting things to do at 44%. A safe, attractive experience is 35%. And for all our talk about free parking, 8% of you want better public transport and better parking as the #1 priority for attracting visitors back to the city centre. So thank you for that snapshot, very informative as always. Time now for our second, I suppose we could call them our special guests today. Jim O'Neill is the city economist who helped drive the creation of the Northern Powerhouse, that turbocharging of the economy of the north of England, building on Manchester's amazing rebirth in recent decades. That's a success of many fathers and mothers. You won't need reminding that the rejuvenation of Manchester also involved a deep partnership between City Council, University, property and community. Well, Jim, now Lord O'Neill, is a powerful advocate for cities and their development. He's Vice Chair of the Northern Powerhouse, and here's his perspective and advice for Derby.
It's a huge pleasure and privilege for me to be briefly here with you to talk about making Derby a fantastic place for business and people to live. I'm Jim O'Neill. As some of you may know, most of you probably don't. I've been immersed in the whole issue of trying to do something about the balance of the country's economic growth, primarily based around urban areas. The whole Northern Powerhouse thing sort of originated from a review I chaired, hosted by the RSA. And indeed, Derby was, along with Nottingham, one of the areas we focused on at the time, which is now goodness me, getting on for 10 years ago. And I guess I've got 3 messages for you, particularly in the spirit of this government's levelling up paper a few weeks ago, all 340 odd pages of it. The first one, as we all know, given the challenges going on around the world and nationally in this country with government debt and all the money spent on COVID, it isn't a magic money tree that goes on forever. And a lot of things for helping cities like Derby and many others require more central money, but I don't think we should kid ourselves it's coming tomorrow. So the thing to really seize the opportunity on, because it would put a permanent stake benefiting, in my view, places like Derby in the future, is the whole issue of devolution. As we've seen in my own hometown, Greater Manchester, if you really have people with ambition and leaders and want to have accountability to go with it, it can start to make a difference. And so in that regard, I am a big, big fan of Derby teaming up with Nottingham, despite your beautiful historic rivalry, and seizing this unique opportunity to make a permanent difference to your future. Second thing related to that, as I've discussed with John and some others that are kind enough to invite me to this event, what is your magical DNA? A lot of people around the country, when they come talking to me about how they want something to make them a better place, to be honest, frankly, often don't think about anything other than the fact they used to have a proud history. It's not good enough. In order to really seize the opportunity, irrelevant of the role of government, and make business and ambitious people of the next generation to want to come to Derby and base their lives there, make yourselves think about what it is you have to offer the world that makes you such an interesting place. And I'm sure there must be endless. Which takes me to the third issue. From what little I know of Derby, you are actually probably in a better position than many places because you already have some world-class companies that are based there. And they are always going to have the ebb and flow of their own challenges, but it gives you a platform that a lot of other places that have ambition don't have. And along with what's going on in the rest of the world and the seemingly never-ending issues we've had for many years, my last comment to you is, never let a crisis or an opportunity go to waste. Seize the moment. Good luck to you all, and thanks for having me.
So some sharp pointers from Jim O'Neill, the importance of devolution and regional cooperation, seeking out your magical DNA and then seizing the moment. Well, we've talked about repurposing from a global perspective. We've had a deep dive into the initiatives and the civic drive. We're now going to take a wider look involving the community, property and the university as well, with our panel discussion on repurposing place. We welcome your engagement using Slido, and I invite to the stage our 4 panellists. They are Anissa Ahmed, who's an architecture student at the University of Derby, John Wood, who's an associate director at Granger PLC, Ruchita Sheikh, who's the chief executive of ArtCore, and Jamie Quinn Starkey, who's founder of Down to Earth Derby, that organisation supported by Sir Tim Smith of the Eden Project. The 4 of you can make your way to the stage. Let's give them a round of applause as they do so. And as they make their way down the ramp and towards their comfortable chairs, let me give you some introductions as they settle in. Anissa Ahmed is an architecture student at the University of Derby. She's just gained a first class degree, so congratulations to you on that. Let's give her a round of applause for that, actually. And she's also won this year's design prize for her concept on how to repurpose one of the city's vacant sites. So we'll hear more about that in just a moment. Next to her is John Wood. John's an associate director at Granger PLC. He handles the acquisition side in the investment team, and he was the man who took the recommendation to invest £35 million in Derby to the Granger board. That's going to bring 259 quality apartments into the heart of the city. So I suppose we should say thank you for your advocacy on that cause as well. Next to him is Jamie Quinn Starkey, who's founder of Down to Earth Derby. That's a community interest company promoting land-based regeneration with great ideas for city sites. And as I said, it was Jamie's work that first caught the eye of Sir Tim Smith and the Eden Project. And Ruchita Sheikh is Chief Executive of ArtCore. That's an international centre for contemporary art and creativity based in Derby. Delivers a mix of community and professional arts activity across the city. Thank you to the four of you for being with us. Anissa, I'm going to start with you. Just talk us through the concept that won the design prize, your ideas on how to repurpose one part of Derby.
So, is my mic on?
Yeah,
Okay.
go ahead.
Yeah, so my concept was to introduce a new living space in Derby, and I settled with the site of Cathedral Green, which has been empty for many years. And I really liked the idea of the river being there, and I thought it would be the most ideal location to create luxury living, as well as including retail and leisure in the building also.
Thank you. Do we have some more slides on this? There we are. So here we're seeing a slightly different aspect to it, and everyone looking very, very jolly. You're struck looking at this, and he said how green it is.
Yeah, so that was a very important concept for me. So biophilic design is something we studied quite a lot at uni and is quite important for the University of Derby. And I thought it was really important to include a lot of greenery, not only on the inside of the building, just by adding plants and stuff, but also on the exterior, because I feel the location is quite dull at the moment. So adding colourful plants and colourful trees and just some greenery really brings the area to life, as well as the building makes it stand out.
And I see the water there as well, so it really has taken to heart some of the things we've been talking about at this summit in recent years about unlocking the water, stripping away the concrete and giving everything a natural feel. Well, thank you for talking us through that, and congratulations on winning this year's design prize. John Wood, when you look at images like that, does that make you think, yeah, we need more of that, I want more Granger properties to look like that?
I didn't think I'd be saying this. It actually puts a smile on my face, because back in 2017, I was looking at that site for our first dabble in Derby, if you like. So that's how we come to get under the surface of Derby. You know, it was drawn to us quite some time ago. We just couldn't quite, at that time, find the right property to invest in. So just touching on Granger, who we are, what we are, see some pretty impressive numbers on the slide. Our mission is to professionalise the private rental sector. We are the largest listed provider of rental homes in the country, just shy of 10,000 operational. Got another pipeline of just shy of 10,000 as well, so we're very busy. And that's just the iceberg moments. There's plenty going on beneath the surface as well. Another point to flag to everyone in the room, we employ everyone in our schemes. We don't outsource the operational side of it or anything. So everyone you see in one of our schemes, in our offices, everyone is employed by Granger. So we are a national, local operator, if that makes any sense. I've got connections in most regional cities, just basically through operational buildings and everything that we're doing right now. We have a long-term vision to grow that pipeline as well. So yeah, here we are in Derby talking about one of our pipeline opportunities that CGI will complete next year, as been touched on. 259 1- and 2-bed apartments, amenity space overlooking the public square that will be delivered. We've got a roof terrace, and we have a lot of inclusive items within our schemes, which we're hoping that will become the normal expectation for any of our residents who want to rent in the sector.
Anissa, what do you think of that? What does the inner
Fantastic
architect?
scheme, by the way.
What does the inner architect say?
I,
Chat later.
I think that would be really interesting on the site. It's just, as people have mentioned before, Derby has a really interesting history, which I feel is being forgotten about, and it's really important to introduce building without offending the history of Derby. And I feel like this building isn't doing too much with the exterior brickwork and stuff, so I think it really sits on the site really well.
Thank you very much. Rashida Sheikh from ArtCore, your Chief Executive. It's an international centre for contemporary art and creativity. Tell me a little about the work you do.
So ArtCore is a contemporary visual arts organisation which came to Derby in 2009. It started in India, where my husband Zahir and myself, we started once we graduated and needed a place to showcase art, and there wasn't any place in that city to showcase art, but the best of the universities was there in the city. So it started with an intention to support emerging artists, and it was running in India in the city of Baroda in Gujarat state for nearly 12 years before myself and Zahir decided to move to the UK, and we were in London for about 5 years, trying to find our feet, doing things, doing work, really not able to, well, our creativity, our arts, our engagement in arts and culture was pulling us in that direction, and we happened to come to Derby. So people often ask me, what made you come to Derby? Why Derby? So as somebody who's born and brought up in India, came to Derby to find more people, creative people like me, started ArtCore in 2009, and it started with offering support opportunities to emerging artists, but also to engage people who have made Derby their home, from another city, another place, and also people who live in Derby to experience art and culture. That's what ArtCore does. We are based over 3 sites. We have a site on Charnwood Street, which is a community hub. We have a site on Osnabrück Square, that little cabin, which is an artist residency hub. And we have our art gallery hub, which is the old Laura Ashley building. And that's what we did in 2019. We were able to contribute to the cultural offer in the city by investing in this building, making it into an art gallery and craft space, a space where people can come and engage. Has a cafe, a shop, but also lots of creative exhibitions and experiences for people to take part in. So if you haven't visited, there's recently this exhibition on the move with Felix Nussbaum, definitely connecting the dots with Osnabrück and Derby, currently on at the gallery space on the other side of this building. Do come and visit and have a look at the exhibition.
And that speaks to the whole idea of experience and improving experience. You're deepening the cultural life of the city and the areas around it.
If we are all here looking at repurposing the city centre, re-looking at ways how to make it more vibrant, more colourful. The cultural offer was kind of top on what John was presenting earlier in his slide, and it really makes a difference when we have more experiential offer in the city centre to bring people in, particularly to bring young people in. You know, I have a 19-year-old, and you know, I would like for him to be in the city, be with us, and you know, similarly, there's young people offering more, having more opportunities for young people to engage in is something that I you know, amongst everything that we are planning to do, would be quite good to engage in. Yeah.
Thank you. And Jamie Quince Starkey, you're founder of Down to Earth Derby, and that's land-based regeneration, and you come up with ideas on how to make wonderful use of existing city sites. Talk me through some of your work.
So yeah, just a brief intro is, I always find myself quite overwhelmed being sat in these positions where I'm being whisked around to these conversations. It's been an absolute whirlwind from the allotment plot on Markeaton Street to where we are now, and talking about these radical ideas.
Sorry, that's where it started, with an allotment.
In my back garden, actually.
Ah.
So yeah, the idea came from the back garden. Bit of an epiphany, conflict, crisis, nature enthusiast on one hand, and I'm building aeroplane engines on the other. Obviously, that's an obvious conflict. And we're in such overwhelming, disempowering times. I'm a working class shop floor factory fitter, done shift work for the last 10 years of my life. Derby born and bred, and the feeling is nothing ever happens in Derby. Don't ever look up. Don't ever think that you can come out of your box. And I just was sick of it. I was so fed up with that way of thinking that why couldn't I do something? Why can't people from my background, which is the majority of the demographic in the city centre, why can't we do something about the city centre that we love? Frustratingly, it's a love-hate relationship with Derby. I love it to bits, and I love everything that Derby represents. The frustration is seeing them brownfield sites that could be something completely imaginative. So that's where it started. Then we ended up going from an allotment site and taking people for walks and connecting people with nature, with the community and with themselves, to becoming an independent catalyst for nature-based regeneration, which, we've gone quite professional there. We've stepped up, stepped up the mark. And it makes sense for us because, what we're talking about is something that every single person is going to have to do. We have to make nature a focal point of our professional lives, but also it has to be something that our relationship with nature has to improve tenfold. If it doesn't, we've seen all the facts and the figures, and again, very overwhelming, very disempowering. It's about doing it in a way that is down to earth. I was going to say it at some point. It's about being realistic, it's about, being pragmatic, and it's about working with as many different people as possible. We're not here to cause that conflict and not work. We want to work with as many people as possible to make this happen, because this is for everybody of Derby. I know I've waffled on.
That's all right. Tell me about Tim Smith and his project.
So Tim is our mentor. I sent him a cheeky email about Down to Earth about 3 years ago. He invited me down, met him, met his team. He became a big supporter of Down to Earth pretty much straight away. And having him on the phone has been obviously exponentially supportive. I like to describe Tim as Willy Wonka, Albus Dumbledore, and Del Boy, all wrapped into one person. So to have that advice from that kind of person, I'm here. Somehow I've got to this point. So,
and he's been to Derby. He's visited you.
So yeah, he came to Derby. So we did this showcase event, which I'm thinking a lot of people here came to. We had this showcase event at Bustler Market in April, where we kind of pitched our imagination for the city centre with the support from Catapult and the support that we've had at Eden. So yeah, redesigning brownfield sites and nature-based regeneration, it doesn't work unless we regenerate these sites, and it doesn't work unless we create a new viable economic model. It doesn't work if we don't mobilise socially and give the public more accountability and responsibility and ownership in the city.
So what is this sketch showing me?
This is the Electric Daisy, which is our kind of idea for a cocktail bar, botanical cocktail bar in the city centre. So this is the old Price's supermarket, which was way before my time, at the bottom of Sadlergate, opposite Bold Lane car park. So this site's not been utilised for a long, long time. And, we're talking about reconnecting people with nature and our relationship with nature. That's not just you going out into a field. It's not just a rewilding exercise. It's about accessing them touch points and making nature as accessible as possible, and being informal and not being as in your face. And we can do this by creating amazing spaces for people, we are from Derby, we do like to have a drink. why don't we create a bar where people can be around nature, you know, with that biophilic design principle in place? Why can't we create somewhere like that people will have that impact of that relationship with nature? And also, it's not just that, you know, the nature-based regeneration element, we were talking and I'm discussing with loads of different people about this site. You know, how do we offer opportunity? You know, the student union doesn't have a presence in the city centre anymore, doesn't have a bar. Why can't we bring that to the city centre?
And he said that thought of reconnecting people with nature, is that part of the conversation in modern architecture? Is this something you and your fellow students think about?
Yes, 100%. It's actually the main focus, sustainable architecture and how to create buildings that benefit people's health. So bearing in mind with the pandemic we just went through, we now need to design buildings where if we are in a situation like that again, how can we still be connected to the nature whilst still being indoors? And I feel like a lot of people found it a struggle when we were in the pandemic because we were really closed off, and especially living in the cities, we need to find a way to actually engage nature inside the building and create lots of new green spaces for people to just visit and just to engage with the nature and the outdoors as well.
And as your project showed, you do that on a number of different levels. You have the big civic spaces that Jamie was just describing, but you also build it into the construction itself, the fabric of the residential building.
Yeah, so in my building I actually have a private garden for the residents that will be living there, but I also created an indoor social hub, bearing in mind the pandemic, so I thought it'd be nice to create a social space for the residents living there. In case of a future pandemic, they've got a place to socialise, rather than having people closed off and just neglected in their own zones and in their own homes. There's a social hub that I designed for the residents that will be living there. So it's always about keeping people in mind and putting them first, rather than just designing a building. Is how is it going to benefit the people living in the building?
Just picking up one thought on Slido from our audience, that developments like that will inevitably carry a higher cost.
Yes.
How do you account for that? Is it something that the end customer ends up paying for? Are developers willing to take a risk on having a higher cost built into the project from the start?
I feel like with the time and the day and age we are living in, costs are actually just going up regardless. But if we are designing new spaces, I feel like investing the money is a big thing, because in the long run, these buildings is what's going to re-engage people with, for example, Derby, and bring people into the city again. So if we're just going to quickly just make some cheap buildings, not really think about how it's going to look attractive on the outside as well as the inside, I just feel there's no point doing it altogether.
And John, from your perspective from the property industry, are you comfortable with the idea that modern developments will have to have additional features, extra space, extra sense of community, and there will be higher costs with that? And that's just the price of doing business now.
Yeah, it's true, to be honest with you, and it's a difficult one to answer. I mean, we're constantly evolving our specification to meet the needs and expectations of our customers, if you like, our residents. But it's got to be a combined effort. I mean, to be fair, when we first started looking at our scheme over on Beckerwell, there was gaps. So, you know, we all had to bang our heads together and work together to try and overcome those issues. And I think the reason why it was successfully starting on site was no one person was trying to take the credit for it. We were all working together. But yeah, we are conscious, and yes, there will be challenges, but you've got to work together, try and overcome them. It's the only way it's going to work. If someone, you know, sits back and folds their arms and said, that's the price, you're not going to get anywhere.
And there is a dilemma here, because people want, and you could argue deserve, better spaces, better connected with nature, with green and blue, but we also need more affordable housing.
Yeah.
We also need sort of housing at a cost that will attract the workers you need
Yeah.
for your development.
We're mid-market.
How do you balance that?
We're a mid-market operator. You know, we're forever. I'm not going to try and beat anyone up because it's not my place to do that. But somebody sees a rent of £5,000 a month. That's it. That's the embedded rents for the market. We don't operate like that. We see where the embedded rents are. We have an underwrite. We'll get to a number. It's a take it or leave it opportunity. If the gap's small, then we'll all get around the table and see if we can make it work. If something just isn't viable, then we'll all walk away. We're all busy people. But yeah, it's difficult at the moment, the current climate and what have you. So it's a case of managing expectations as best we can.
Rachita, John, in his opening remarks, used what I thought was a really interesting phrase, the idea of curating the city centre. The things don't just happen. You arrange for space to be created and also for events to take place. Is there enough cultural curation? Are there enough festivals? Are there enough celebrations of culture in Derby and Derbyshire?
Interesting question. There are festivals and there are events happening across Derby, Derbyshire, but I think there's need to have more city-centric events and festivals, bringing people from all walks of life, from around the city, from different parts of the city, into the city centre. I think there's definitely an appetite for that. There's definitely a room to do that. And I know somebody mentioned in one of the questions about doing the Osnabrück Square. It is really important. We have this fantastic building with the market hall that's being shaped into. Yes, Art Goes based around the corner. There's Quad on the other side of the square, a little further. So there is, in a way, the cultural infrastructure in terms of the cultural organizations in the city, but it's about providing the mechanism. It's about investing in areas where places, open spaces can be used in more creative ways for festivals, for performances, for different cultural things to happen in the city, where people of Derby, people coming from outside of Derby to engage in, to take part, be a part of. Definitely, I think there's more appetite for that to happen.
I know you were listening to what Jamie was saying about the deepening the connections with nature. Listening to that, did you think, yeah, we can plug into this as well? There's a connection between culture and nature, and there's more work to do there.
Certainly. You know, the what you see on the Market Square right now, you know, it's a fantastic place where it can tie in very well with performances, with you know, with music, things happening in the evening, activities for families to take part over summer holidays. So it definitely connects well. Yeah.
John, go on.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, I'm bursting with questions, and I'm conscious you've given a Scouser a microphone, so, you know, I could keep you here for 2 hours, to be honest with you, but I won't, because you're all nice people. So, just going back to the place, we positioned our scheme in Derby at that point in time. We accepted everything that the city had to offer, and we accepted the regeneration vision, if you like, at that point in time. We then embedded our scheme. We've called it the Condor. I don't know if anyone knows. The Condor refers back to a nod to the engineering history of the city. It's the first engine Rolls-Royce produced back in 1918, I think it was. We've been going over 100 years. This will be the first build-to-rent scheme launched in Derby. So there's the linkage. We accepted it. What I'm seeing now, and Paul commented before on the passion and how real that vision has now become, this is a massive opportunity for Derby. And I am looking at these CGIs thinking we've picked the right time to invest in Derby, because we're going to benefit from everything else that's going on.
Just one question from Slido. When you were advocating to the board why they should put money in Derby, what were the reasons you gave?
Oh, God.
The top 3 selling points for Derby, I think.
There isn't top 3, Declan. There's a whole list. There's a point scoring system which everyone will use. To be fair, Derby is not towards the top of that list. It doesn't score on every section of the metric, if you like. But there are certain ticks in boxes which you can't avoid. You know, you can't ignore. John, your slide before, touching at salaries, you know, you haven't got one of the, you know, an enviable shopping offering in this city, which many cities would take tomorrow into their locations. There's something beneath the surface. We scratch beneath the surface because we're regionally based. We get it. We actually get Derby. So whilst it's all a database metric reporting system, there's still that gut feeling that goes with it as well. And once you scratch the surface, you can start to tell a compelling story to what Derby has to offer. Look at the slides.
Let me read out some of the comments that we're getting on Slido. Green spaces cost less than buildings and have an increasingly larger socio-economic impact. It's about rebalancing to reflect the new future for cities. Another one praising great and exciting ideas. How do we ensure a joined up, affordable and logical approach to bring all this to reality within a working timeline? Well, that is the question. An anonymous comment: it'd be great to see an end to land banking and compulsory and a strong compulsory purchase order policy in place. That's perhaps one for Paul to talk about if he's back at next year's property summit. Here's one. We've heard a lot of individual schemes today. It's critical that we look at the connectivity of each within the city to make the regeneration coherent. And affordability is about designing and building sustainable housing so everyone can afford to pay the bill. Jamie, what are Tim Smith's plans? Do we know what they are? Are we allowed to say what they are?
There are plans.
Are you allowed to tell us what they are?
They're down to earth plans. You know, Tim's. What I can say about the Eden project and Tim specifically is, you know, speaking with him, we on a weekly basis and catching up with him when I can. He's like my adopted granddad. I'll give him that term. He's super excited about Derby. Like it's one of the projects that they're most excited about. You know, you can take that if you want. You know. Tim is excited about Derby because of what he said in his talk about the bones and the potential. And you know, when we took him for a tour of Derby with John, they loved it. They couldn't believe that we've got the issues that we've got with the infrastructure that's here. Although we did see a trolley in the river walking past, which was like a perfect prop, to be honest, to explain the issues. But
it's called heritage, that is.
Yeah, they are. They're super excited. They're excited about the energy and the enthusiasm that we've brought. They're excited about the fact that, you know, Derby, we are so connected. There is so many amazing things happening, and it's so close. Everything's in such close proximity, and it's actually not going to cost a lot of money. You know, the actual end of it is it's not going to cost a lot of money to make the changes that we want to make. And Tim's aspect, you know, from an Eden perspective is let's romanticize Derby again. You know, let's romanticize it. We've got this amazing history. He spoke about the Lunar Society. He spoke about the Enlightenment, and why can't Derby have that? Like, why can't we do this? And that's exactly what we're bringing. And with Tim's support, you know, and the backing that we have from them, and the advice that we have from the Eden team, they're kind of just telling us to go for it, and they're telling us to go crazy with them pictures, and you know, and
used us as the example.
Yeah.
Christmas, 2 weeks before Christmas 2019, that's where we were.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
Okay. That's the type of cooperation that we want to see across the community in Derby. Give them a big round of applause. Panel, thank you very much. You are all free to depart from the hot lights of the stage, and thank you so much for sharing your experiences and your perceptives with us. One final question now for all of you in the room, for those of you watching us remotely live in your home or office. If you're watching on a replay, I'm afraid you'll not find this question available to you. Open up Slido again, slido.com, click on the polls tab, and we're going to put to you the second question of the day. The priority for repurposing Derby City Centre is: 1, more city living. 2, more city workers. 3, more city visitors. 4, a safer, more attractive city experience. The same 4 options that we gave you last time. Pick the one that you think is the top priority for repurposing Derby city centre. More city living, workers, visitors, or a safer, more attractive city experience. So the voting is in as I was talking to you, and isn't that quite something? A total reversal, almost, if I wrote the numbers down correctly last time. Last time I had just 9% of you going for a safer, more attractive city experience. Is that right? No, about 60. Okay, so 70 then. Yes, fine. I see what's happened. It's reordered the categories so that the most important one went to the top. So last time, yes, you're right, John, it was around 70 going for a safer, more attractive city experience. Now that number has increased to 85, and then we see much, much smaller numbers on that. So after listening to all the perspectives that we've had during the course of the day, it's really hammered home the message that it is city experience that is now the next chapter of Derby's development. Now, before handing over to Chris Poulter, the leader of Derby City Council, he's going to close the summit and have some remarks. I want to thank a few people. First of all, our speakers here and those who recorded pieces as our special guests. They've brought an insight and an energy and a passion to this discussion, and we're grateful to them for that. We say thank you again to our sponsors, Faith and Gold and Atkins, and also to AJS Structural Design and Matthew Montague Architects. We say thank you to the team here at the Quad, to Lindley Productions, and to the team at Marketing Derby for just making things happen. And thank you to all of you here in the room watching us remotely. I know you'll have taken a lot of value from today's discussion, and another refresh of your recognition that Derby is serious about regeneration and repurposing. So thank you very much for being part of our event today. Now, remember what John said earlier. Those of you here in the Quad are very welcome to pop over to St James's Street to see the Derby City Lab, which is now open. To close the summit, I'm going to introduce Councillor Chris Poulter, and he has a special request of you and an idea for you to help support Derby. After the Councillor has spoken, we'll then show you a short film promoting Derby as a life-sized city. So thank you for your attention. I'm Declan Curry. Please welcome Councillor Chris Poulter.
Yes, thank you, Declan. I hope not to keep you too long, because not least for the fact that I need the toilet anyway. But Declan, you've stolen some of my thank yous there. Thank you to John and his team for organising today. Thank you for the Quad for hosting us. Thank you for all you at home, whether you're in the bath or the swimming pool or the garden or wherever you're listening from, to take the time to listen to our ambition here in Derby. So big thank yous for that, and big thank yous to the contributors to the conversations today. And I was going to remind people to also join us at the City Lab straight afterwards. So turning to some of the contributions today, we had Courtney, who talked to us about having talked to government and them not necessarily listening. Well, we certainly listened today. And as far as who counts you as in their talent pool, Derby certainly does. We count you towards our talent pool, and thank you for coming along today. So we also had Lord O'Neill, who talked to us about the Northern Powerhouse. People have different views on the Northern Powerhouse and how it fits with the Midlands and things, but they, to a degree, we're looking to emanate their success along the way. And one of the ways in which we're going to look to do that is in relation to the ambition to create a mayoral combined authority for the East Midlands, which will be one of the steps necessary to take us towards the power and influence that the likes of the Northern Powerhouse have. So another speaker for us today, or contributor, was Sir Tim Smith from down at the Eton Eton project, and I'm interested to see how that develops massively, because if he can bring Tinkerbell, and if Jamie brings Willy Wonka, Dumbledore and his adopted granddad, then who knows what we can achieve in Derby. Seriously, there are some great ideas coming from Jamie and his team and Down to Earth. If we can get one of those off the ground as soon as possible and up from the ground, then it can be the catalyst to a great not rewilding of the city, but regreening of the city. One of those will prove the value of everything else that it can bring with it. Thank you to Paul Simpson for his for detailing the ambition and the passion that we have in the city. We certainly have that passion. We've got buildings, as he puts it. We're making achievements now rather than just ambition, but we intend to follow through on that with ideas like the rewilding, refacing the river and opening up Markeaton Brook, alongside the developments that we've completed like Moorways. So Jim O'Neill talked about 3 priorities. One was devolution, I've touched on that, but building on our unique global DNA, I think, and I think we know where that is, and we certainly intend to use that, and we won't never lose sight of the world-class companies that we have in the city and the benefits that they bring. So I absolutely agree with his analysis. Turning to Anisha, your designs and the quality of your designs are what we're looking to bring to Derby. We don't want the run-of-the-mill development. We want development, but it's design and ambition and difference that will make the difference, like that that design that you've come up with there for Cathedral Green is an exemplar of the type of development that will make Derby stand out from the norm. So thanks for that. And another thank you to John for not just for Granger's investment so far in the city, but recognising Derby's position in the country, and hopefully you'll enjoy that experience of where you are on Becketwell, and you've heard some more about potential development sites here in Derby. Hopefully, if you enjoy your experience, you'll look around from Granger's point of view, and why not look at Cathedral Green and Bold Lane for further investment in our wonderful city. So we'd like the opportunity to talk to you a bit more about that as well. And there are other opportunities like which haven't been mentioned today, like the North Riverside. You know, we're making the city safe from the river, but it gives us an opportunity on the North Riverside for developments that might well be of interest to companies like Granger's. And Jamie, well, Jamie's Jamie, and he's down to earth, and we've talked a lot about what his ideas are, but we will need one to develop and be the catalyst for more across the city. And finally, Rashida, last but not least, Rashida from ArtCore, I think she speaks about her commitment to art and culture in the city. She's done an awful lot of work with communities in the city already. I know she's ambition to do more, and I entirely agree with her to bring the culture and art from around the city into the city centre. You know, places like we're a multicultural city, and we need to bring that into the city centre. So with all those thanks and rounding up like that, the one thing I do have to try and sell to you, in effect, is the fact that the future of rail is Derby. Mostly, hopefully, one or two of you have heard about the fact that government are looking to bring Great British Rail out of London. So a replacement for Network Rail, an organisation that will be responsible for designing, running and building the rail of the future, and it's coming out of London. They run a competition with 42 cities and towns bidding for that. We are in the last 6 of those remaining cities to be looked at for hosting Great British Rail. We have a ministerial visit that's just been rearranged, I think, for the 10th of August, where we will be able to showcase our rationale that Derby is the only logical home for the rail industry in this country. Alongside that, there is an interesting factor, is that they're looking to run a public vote, so for people to show, local people to show their interest and support for the bid. We've already had great support from partners and businesses in the city. We need you to repeat that by voting for Derby with this logo, and there is a QR code available. It's an easy way to sign on, a simple choice between ourselves and the other 5 non-runners in the competition. But seriously, we would really appreciate people taking this, voting themselves, taking it back to your own empires and sharing it, and companies, and getting as many as possible, because whilst it's not going to be critical, it's not the only deciding factor. The government will look at the spread and the number of supports that they get, and the range of partners that support us in our bid, and you, amongst many others, are exactly the type of people we're looking to support us. So I've got some badges, if anybody wants one, but really, really would appreciate it if you would take a few seconds out to look at that site, sign up, and encourage others to do so. So with that in mind, that's my contribution. Thank you very much again for all of you at home, all of you here, for taking the time to express your support and interest in what we're trying to do here in Derby. Thank you.
The life-sized city. The UK's most central city at the heart of stunning countryside. Cosmopolitan, diverse city life right on the doorstep of the Peak District. Derby, the UK capital for innovation, home to world-class and iconic employers. Plus, over 6,000 SMEs. With a strong economy and plans for growth and diversification. Derby, a great place to live, with 4,500 residential units proposed, in planning, under construction or completed. Derby, a great place to work. Derby, a great place to play. Over £1.4 billion has been invested in the last 10 years, with a further 594 million in the pipeline, and breathtaking visions to repurpose the city centre. Derby, the life-sized city.